The rain hammered against the dumpster lid like 1,000 angry fists, each drop adding to the river that rushed down the alley behind Giovanni's. My polyester uniform clung to my skin, the cheap fabric turning transparent in places I didn't want to think about. The bus was 20 minutes late, again, and my phone had died 2 hours into my double shift. I pressed myself against the brick wall, trying to find some shelter under the restaurant's broken awning. My feet throbbed in the knockoff flats I'd bought from the dollar store, the thin soles offering no protection from the puddles that had formed in the cracked asphalt. The smell of rotting food from the dumpster mixed with diesel fumes from the street, creating a nauseating cocktail that made my empty stomach churn. A car engine purred to life somewhere close, the sound too refined for this neighborhood. I glanced toward the street, watching a sleek black Mercedes pull up to the curb. The passenger window rolled down with an electric hum that spoke of money. Real money, not the crumpled bills I counted for tips. "You're going to catch pneumonia standing there." The voice was deep, cultured, with just a hint of an accent I couldn't place. I squinted through the rain, making out the silhouette of a man leaning across from the driver's seat. His face was partially hidden in shadow, but I caught the gleam of an expensive watch as he gestured toward the passenger door. "I'm fine," I called back, though my chattering teeth probably undermined the claim. "Just waiting for the bus. The number 47 stopped running an hour ago. Construction on 5th Avenue. My heart sank. That meant walking 12 blocks in this downpour, through neighborhoods that weren't safe for a woman alone at midnight. I'd done it before, keys clutched between my fingers like makeshift brass knuckles, but never in weather this bad. "I'll manage," I said, pushing wet hair out of my face. The gesture was pointless. New strands immediately plastered themselves to my forehead. The man sighed, and I heard the click of doors unlocking. "Look, I'm heading east anyway. At least let me drop you at a working bus stop." Every safety video I'd ever watched, every warning my mother had drilled into me before she died, screamed at me to refuse. But the rain was coming down harder now, and I could feel the beginnings of a chill that went bone deep. My apartment had spotty heating on good days. Showing up soaked would mean a night of shivering under thin blankets. "How do I know you're not some psycho?" I asked, taking a half-step forward despite myself. A low chuckle emanated from the car. "Fair question. How about this? I'll put my hands on the steering wheel where you can see them. You can sit in the back, keep your hand on the door handle. First sign of anything sketchy, you bail." I found myself moving toward the car before I'd consciously decided. The interior light flicked on as I opened the back door, and I got my first clear look at him. Dark hair swept back from a face that belonged in magazines, not prowling alleys behind restaurants. His suit probably cost more than I made in 6 months, the fabric pristine despite the late hour. But it was his eyes that made me pause, gray like storm clouds, assessing me with an intelligence that seemed to catalog every detail. "Cassian," he said, keeping his hands visible on the wheel as promised. "And you are?" "Marlowe." I slid onto leather seats that felt like butter against my wet clothes. The car smelled of expensive cologne and something else. Danger, maybe, or power. The kind of scent that warned prey to run. "Where to, Marlowe?" He pulled away from the curb with smooth precision, the Mercedes gliding through puddles that would have swallowed my beat-up Honda. I gave him the address of a bus stop 6 blocks from my actual apartment, still not trusting completely. He nodded without comment, navigating the empty streets with the confidence of someone who owned them. "Giovanni's," he said after a moment. "Good carbonara. Terrible management." "You've eaten there?" I couldn't hide my surprise. Giovanni's was a hole in the wall that survived on lunch rushes and the occasional lost tourist. Once or twice. His eyes met mine in the rearview mirror, a spark of amusement in their depths. "You've been working there long?" 2 years. I didn't mention it was my second job, or that I also stocked shelves at a grocery store 3 mornings a week. "The tips keep the lights on." "Ah," The single syllable held understanding, judgment, or maybe pity. I bristled, sitting up straighter. It's honest work. I didn't suggest otherwise. He turned onto a wider avenue, streetlights casting intermittent gold through the rain-streaked windows. Honest work is rare these days. Something in his tone made me study his profile more carefully. The strong jaw, the way his hands controlled the wheel with casual precision, the subtle bulge under his left shoulder that might have been a phone but probably wasn't. I'd served enough cops at the restaurant to recognize the shape of concealed carry. "What do you do?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "Business," he said simply. "Imports, exports. Nothing as honest as serving carbonara." We drove in silence for several minutes, the rain creating a cocoon of white noise around us. I found myself relaxing despite every instinct, my exhausted body sinking into the heated seats. When was the last time I'd been warm? Really warm, not just surviving between cold spaces. "This is your stop." He pulled over smoothly, the bus shelter glowing under a flickering streetlight. "The number 19 should be here in 12 minutes. I reached for the door handle, then paused. "Why did you stop? Really?" He turned to face me fully for the first time, and I caught my breath. Beautiful was too simple a word for the sharp angles of his face, the intensity that radiated from him like heat from a forge. "You looked like you needed help," he said. And I've always had a weakness for brave women who stand in storms rather than surrender to them. Before I could process that, he was out of the car, opening my door with an umbrella that materialized from nowhere. He held it over me as I climbed out, keeping himself in the rain. "Thank you," I managed, meaning it more than those 2 words could convey. He handed me the umbrella with a slight smile. "Keep it. Consider it an investment in not catching pneumonia." "I can't." "You can." He was already moving back to the driver's side. "Giovanni's, you said. I might stop by again. Try the carbonara." The Mercedes pulled away before I could respond, leaving me standing under a designer umbrella that probably cost more than my rent. I watched the taillights disappear into the rain, wondering if I'd imagined the whole encounter. The bus arrived 15 minutes later, and I spent the ride home trying to convince myself that the flutter in my stomach was just hunger. But I knew better. Cassian, whoever he was, whatever he did, had looked at me like I was something more than a waitress in a cheap uniform. Like I was someone worth stopping for. I should have been terrified. Instead, I found myself hoping he really would come for the carbonara. The next morning arrived too soon, my alarm dragging me from dreams of leather seats and storm-gray eyes. I stumbled through my routine. Shower in the bathroom I shared with 3 other tenants, coffee from the ancient maker that only worked if you hit it twice, the careful application of makeup to hide the exhaustion that had become my default state. Giovanni's was already busy when I arrived for the lunch shift, the kitchen a chaos of clanging pots and shouted orders. I tied my apron, pocketed my order pad, and dove into the familiar dance of table service. "Table 6 is getting impatient," Maria hissed as she passed with a tray of drinks, "and Tony's in a mood." Tony was always in a mood, our manager treating his small kingdom with the iron fist of a dictator. I plastered on my service smile and made my rounds, refilling coffee, taking orders, dodging grabby hands from the construction workers who thought waitresses came with the meal price. It was just past 2 when everything changed. The door burst open with such force it bounced off the wall, the cheerful bell above it clanging discordantly. I turned from the coffee station, pot in hand, and froze. Cassian stood in the doorway, but this wasn't the controlled man from last night. Blood soaked through his white shirt, spreading from a wound in his left shoulder. His face was pale beneath his tan, those storm-gray eyes wild as they swept the restaurant. They found me, locked on with desperate intensity. "Marlowe," he said, and then his knees buckled. I dropped the coffee pot. It shattered on the floor, hot liquid splashing across my shoes, but I was already moving. My body reacted before my mind could process, some instinct older than thought propelling me forward. I caught him before he hit the ground, my arms straining under his weight. "The back," he gasped against my ear. "They're coming." Through the restaurant's front window, I saw 2 black SUVs screech to a halt outside. Men in dark suits emerged, their faces cold and purposeful. One of them checked a gun beneath his jacket. "Maria!" I shouted, already half dragging Cassian toward the kitchen. "Call 911. Tell everyone to get out." The restaurant erupted in chaos. Customers fled through the side exit, chairs toppling in their wake. Tony emerged from his office, took one look at the blood trail we were leaving, and disappeared out the back door without a word. So much for leadership. I shouldered through the kitchen doors, Cassian's weight making every step a struggle. The prep cooks scattered like roaches when lights flicked on, leaving us alone among the stainless steel and steam. "Where?" I panted, looking wildly around the kitchen. "Anywhere they won't look." His voice was weakening, each word clearly costing him. "Marlo, you don't have to—" "Shut up." I spotted the supply closet tucked behind the industrial freezer. It was small, cramped, but hidden from casual view. I dragged him toward it, my muscles screaming protest. The front door chimed again. Heavy footsteps, multiple sets, moving with military precision. I shoved Cassian into the closet, squeezing in after him. The space was barely big enough for one person, let alone 2. I found myself pressed against his chest, feeling the warm spread of blood soaking into my uniform. "Your shirt," he whispered. "They'll see the blood." He was right. I stripped off my apron and outer shirt, leaving just my thin tank top underneath. The bloody clothes got shoved behind a box of cleaning supplies. Then I grabbed a bottle of bleach, splashing it liberally around. The acrid smell burned my nostrils, but would explain away any lingering scent of blood. Footsteps in the kitchen now. Slow, methodical. "Check everywhere," a voice commanded. Accented, but different from Cassian's. Russian, maybe. "He's here." The tracker went dead at this location. I felt Cassian tense against me. His hand moved to his pocket, pulling out a small device that looked like a car fob. With shaking fingers, he pried it open, removed a tiny chip, and crushed it between his teeth. The footsteps came closer. I could see shadows moving through the crack under the door. "What's in there?" The voice was right outside. "Supply closet." That was Joey, one of our line cooks. He must have stayed behind, just cleaning stuff. Haven't seen nobody bleeding come through here. "Open it." My heart hammered so loud I was sure they'd hear it. Cassian's hand found mine in the darkness, squeezing once. An apology, maybe. Or goodbye. The door handle turned. "Hey!" Maria's voice cut through the tension. "What the hell are you doing in my kitchen? We already called the cops." "We're looking for someone," the Russian voice replied. "A dangerous man. He was injured." "Yeah, well, nobody dangerous came through here except you assholes waving guns around. Get out before the police arrive." There was a long pause. I held my breath, Cassian's blood warm and sticky between us. "Search the alley," the voice finally ordered. "He can't have gone far." Footsteps retreated. Car doors slammed. Engines roared to life and faded into the distance. I counted to 100 before daring to move. When I finally opened the closet door, Maria was standing there with a mop bucket and an expression that could have curdled milk. "You got 5 minutes before I call the real cops," she said flatly. "Whatever this is, I don't want any part of it." "Maria, 5 minutes, Marlo. Then you better be gone, and you better not come back." She left, and I turned my attention to Cassian. In the harsh kitchen lights, he looked even worse. The blood had spread down his entire left side, and his skin had taken on a grayish pallor. "Hospital," I said, already trying to support his weight again. "No." His voice was firm despite his condition. "No hospitals. They'll be watching. You'll die. I've had worse." He attempted a smile that turned into a grimace. "Just need somewhere to lie low, stop the bleeding." I wanted to argue, but the set of his jaw told me it would be pointless. My mind raced through options. My apartment was out. Too many nosy neighbors. Hotels would want ID. Then I remembered. My friend Jenna's place. She's in Europe for 2 more weeks. I'm watching her plants. He nodded, already trying to stand. I ducked under his good arm, taking as much weight as I could. "Why did you come here?" I asked as we stumbled toward the back exit. "Didn't plan to." His breath was labored. "Was heading somewhere else when they hit me. Saw the restaurant, remembered you worked lunch shifts. Thought maybe." He trailed off. "Thought maybe the random waitress you gave a ride to would save your ass?" Something like that. This time his smile was more genuine. Good instincts, turns out. We made it to the alley where my ancient Honda sat like a faithful dog. Getting him into the passenger seat took every ounce of strength I had left. By the time I slid behind the wheel, my hands were shaking so badly it took 3 tries to get the key in the ignition. "Marlo." He caught my wrist before I could start the car. "You can walk away, right now. Leave me here, go home, forget this happened. It's the smart play." I looked at him, really looked. Beneath the blood and the expensive clothes, beneath the danger that clung to him like cologne, I saw something else. Vulnerability. A man who'd driven through a storm to help a stranger, now trusting that same stranger with his life. "I don't do smart plays," I said, turning the key. "Ask anyone." Jenna's apartment was a 20-minute drive that felt like hours. I kept checking the mirrors for black SUVs, jumping every time a car got too close. Cassian stayed conscious but quiet, his hand pressed to his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. The building had underground parking, a luxury in this part of town. I pulled into Jenna's space, grateful for the privacy. Getting Cassian to the 3rd floor was a nightmare of fumbled keys and barely suppressed groans of pain. By the time we stumbled through her door, we were both soaked in sweat and blood. I deposited him on the couch and ran for Jenna's bathroom. She was a nurse, thank God, and kept a better-stocked medicine cabinet than most pharmacies. I grabbed everything that looked useful: gauze, tape, antiseptic, the bottle of painkillers from her wisdom tooth surgery. When I returned, Cassian had managed to remove his jacket and was working on his shirt buttons with one hand. I batted his fingers away and took over, trying not to think about the intimacy of undressing him. The wound was ugly but clean, a through and through just below his left shoulder. I'd seen enough medical dramas to know that was good. No bullet to dig out. "This is going to hurt," I warned, uncapping the antiseptic. "Can't be worse than—" He broke off with a hiss as I poured the liquid over the wound. His whole body went rigid, jaw clenched so tight I worried he'd crack teeth. I worked quickly, packing the wound with gauze, taping everything in place. My hands moved with a confidence I didn't feel, driven by the simple need to stop the bleeding, to fix what was broken. "Where'd you learn first aid?" he asked when I finally sat back. "TV mostly, plus a semester of community college before I dropped out." I started cleaning up the bloody supplies, needing something to do with my hands. "You should really see a doctor." "I have one. He'll come tomorrow if I'm still alive." He was studying me with those storm-gray eyes, something unreadable in his expression. "Why are you helping me?" I paused in my cleaning. It was a fair question, one I'd been asking myself since I caught him in the restaurant. "You helped me first," I said simply. "Last night you could have driven past, but you stopped." "That was different." "Was it?" I met his gaze. "You saw someone who needed help and acted. That's all I'm doing." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "The men who are after me, they're not good people, Marlowe. Being near me puts you in danger. Are you good people?" The question hung between us. He looked away, jaw working. "No," he said finally. "I'm not. But you're not them." "No." His voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm not them." I finished cleaning and went to wash the blood off my hands. When I came back, he was lying back against the cushions, eyes closed. For a moment, I thought he'd passed out, but they opened when I approached. "There's something else," he said. "In my jacket pocket. A phone. I need to make a call. Let my people know I'm alive." I found the phone, latest model, of course, and handed it to him. He dialed from memory, speaking rapid Italian when someone answered. I caught my name, Jenna's address, and not much else. The conversation was brief. "Someone will come by tomorrow," he said, setting the phone aside, "to check the wound and bring supplies. They'll compensate you for your trouble." "I don't want—" "Please." He caught my hand, his touch sending electricity up my arm. "You saved my life today. Let me return the favor, even if it's just with money." I should have pulled away, should have maintained distance. Instead, I found myself squeezing his fingers. "Who are you, really?" I asked. "What kind of business gets you shot in the middle of the day?" He was quiet so long I thought he wouldn't answer. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of confession. "My family has interests in many things: shipping, construction, waste management. But that's just what's on paper." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "My father built an empire in this city. When he died, it passed to me. I've tried to make it cleaner, more legitimate. But the old ways die hard, and the old enemies die harder." "Your mob," I said. It wasn't a question. Such an American term. His smile was rueful. "We prefer family business." I should have been terrified, should have run screaming from the apartment. Instead, I found myself oddly unsurprised. There had always been something dangerous about him, something that whispered of power and violence beneath the polished surface. "The Russians," I said. "They work for a rival family?" "The Bratva. They've been trying to move into our territory for months. Today they made their play." His expression darkened. "They missed. Lucky for you. Lucky I remembered a brave waitress who stands in storms." His eyes found mine again, though I'm starting to think luck had nothing to do with it. Heat crept up my neck. I stood abruptly, needing space between us. "You should rest. I'll stay in Jenna's room. Keep watch in case they somehow track you here." Marlowe. My name on his lips was like aged whiskey. Smooth, intoxicating, dangerous. "Thank you." I nodded, not trusting my voice, and escaped to the bedroom. But sleep didn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw storm gray ones looking back, full of gratitude and something else. Something that made my pulse race and my skin flush. I'd saved a stranger's life today. A dangerous stranger who commanded an empire built on blood and concrete. Common sense said I should be terrified. So why did I feel more alive than I had in years? The knock came at 7 a.m. sharp, 3 short raps followed by 2 long ones. I jerked awake on Jenna's bed, still fully dressed from my fitful night of half-sleep. Through the bedroom door, I heard Cassian's voice, low and cautious. "That's them," he called. "The pattern means it's safe." I stumbled to the door, checking the peephole out of habit. 2 men stood in the hallway, one older with silver at his temples carrying a medical bag, the other younger and built like a brick wall. Both wore expensive suits that somehow made them look more dangerous, not less. "Miss Reynolds." The older man nodded as I opened the door. "I'm Dr. Benedetti. This is Marco. We're here for Mr. Castellano." They moved with practiced efficiency, the doctor heading straight for Cassian, while Marco positioned himself by the window, eyes scanning the street below. I hovered uncertainly by the kitchen counter, watching Benedetti examine the wound with gentle expertise. "Not bad work," he said, glancing at me with approval. "You probably saved his life." "She did," Cassian said firmly. His color was better this morning, though pain still tightened the corners of his eyes. Benedetti worked in silence, cleaning and redressing the wound with supplies from his bag. He produced a syringe, administering what I assumed were antibiotics, then handed Cassian a bottle of pills. "Twice daily with food. The wound is clean, but infection is still a risk." He turned to me. "He needs rest, fluids, and someone to watch for fever. Can you manage that?" I started to protest that I wasn't a nurse, that I had work, that this wasn't my responsibility. But Cassian's eyes found mine, and the words died. "Yes," I heard myself say. "I can manage." Marco stepped away from the window. "Sir, we should move you. The safe house in—" "No." Cassian's voice cut through the suggestion. "They'll be watching all our properties. I'm safer here for now." "But the girl—" "The woman," Cassian corrected sharply, "has already proven herself. I trust her." Something warm bloomed in my chest at his words. Trust. From a man who probably trusted no one. Benedetti packed his supplies, then surprised me by pressing a thick envelope into my hands. "For your trouble," he said, "and your discretion." I looked inside and nearly dropped it. More cash than I'd seen in my life. Crisp hundreds that could solve every financial problem I had. "I can't—" "You can and you will," Cassian interrupted. "Consider it sick pay. You're missing work to play nurse." He had a point. Tony had made it clear through Maria's text that I was fired. No surprise there. The grocery store would drop me too once I missed tomorrow's shift. But this money— "Thank you," I said quietly, setting the envelope aside. The amount made me uncomfortable, but I wasn't stupid enough to refuse it entirely. After the men left, silence settled over the apartment. Cassian dozed on the couch while I made coffee and tried to process the last 18 hours. Yesterday morning I'd been a waitress with 2 jobs and too many bills. Now I was harboring a wounded mob boss with enough cash to pay rent for 6 months. "You're thinking too loud," Cassian murmured without opening his eyes. "How can you tell?" "You're stirring that coffee like it personally offended you." I looked down at the mug I'd been absent-mindedly attacking and set the spoon aside. "This is insane." "Which part?" He opened his eyes, a ghost of a smile playing at his lips. "The gunshot wound or the money?" "All of it." I brought him water and his antibiotics, settling on the coffee table facing him. "Yesterday my biggest problem was making rent. Now I'm hiding a marked man from the Russian mob. Life has a way of shifting quickly." He took the pills, grimacing. "Trust me." "I know." "How did you end up in this life?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. "I mean, were you born into it, or—" His expression grew distant. "Born into it. My grandfather came here from Sicily with nothing, built something from that nothing. My father expanded it, made the family name one to respect, or fear, depending on which side you stood. And you?" "I inherited an empire I never asked for." He shifted, wincing at the movement. "When my father died 5 years ago, I had a choice. Walk away and watch everything he built crumble, or step up and try to change it from within." "Change it how?" "Legitimacy. Real businesses, clean money. Get out of the old rackets that hurt more than they help." His jaw tightened. "But the other families don't want change. They see it as weakness. Hence the bullets." "Hence the bullets," he agreed. I studied him in the morning light filtering through Jenna's sheer curtains. Without the armor of his expensive suit, he looked younger, more vulnerable. Still devastatingly handsome, but human in a way that made my chest tight. "Can I ask you something?" I said. He nodded. "Last night, in the rain, were you really just passing by?" His eyes met mine, and something electric passed between us. "No." My breath caught. "No? I'd noticed you before, at the restaurant." He looked almost embarrassed. "You have this way of moving through chaos like it can't touch you, graceful under pressure. I'd come in a few times, sat in the back, watched you handle difficult customers with a smile that never quite reached your eyes." "You were stalking me?" "Observing," he corrected. "I was, curious about the woman who could serve entitled assholes all day and still find kindness for the kitchen staff, who shared her tips with the busboy when she thought no one was looking." Heat crept up my neck. "How long?" 3 weeks, maybe 4. I kept telling myself I'd speak to you, but the timing never felt right. Then last night I saw you standing in that alley, rain soaking through your clothes, still holding your head high. He trailed off, shaking his head. I couldn't drive past. "So you offered a stranger a ride." "You were never a stranger, Marlowe. Not to me." The weight of his words settled over me like a blanket. Part of me wanted to be angry at the invasion of privacy, but mostly I felt seen. For the first time in years, someone had looked past the uniform and noticed me. "That's either romantic or creepy," I said, trying for levity. "I can't decide which." "Both, probably." His smile was self-deprecating. "I'm not used to wanting things I can't simply take." "And you wanted to know you." The honesty in his voice made my skin prickle. To understand how someone could shine so bright in the middle of so much darkness. I had to look away, overwhelmed by the intensity of his gaze. "I don't shine. I survive." That's what makes it remarkable. We sat in loaded silence, the air between us thick with unspoken possibilities. Then his phone buzzed, shattering the moment. He checked it, frowning. "Problems? Developments." He typed a response one-handed. "The Russians are turning the city upside down looking for me. My absence has been noticed." "What does that mean?" "It means I've put you in more danger than I intended." He set the phone aside, running his good hand through his hair. "You should leave. Take the money, get out of town for a while. I'll have Marco arrange—" "No." He blinked at my interruption. "Marlowe, you don't understand. If they find out you helped me, then we better make sure they don't find out." I stood, pacing to the window. "I'm not running. This is my home, such as it is. Besides, where would I go? I've never been further than Jersey. Anywhere, everywhere. The world is bigger than this city. Not my world." I turned back to him. "My world is 12 blocks of struggling businesses and overpriced apartments. It's double shifts and late buses and counting pennies for ramen. But it's mine." He was quiet for a moment, studying me with those storm-gray eyes. "You're either very brave or very foolish." "Probably both." I managed to smile. "But I'm also stubborn. Ask anyone who's tried to skip out on a check." "Marlowe." The way he said my name made heat pool low in my belly. "I need you to understand. The people after me don't care about innocence. They'll hurt you just for being near me. Then I guess you better heal fast and deal with them." Something shifted in his expression, surprise melting into something warmer. "Just like that? You trust me to keep you safe?" "You trusted me with your life," I pointed out. "Seems only fair to return the favor." His phone buzzed again. This time when he read it, his expression darkened considerably. "What now?" They found my car, the one I abandoned before coming to the restaurant. He showed me a photo on his phone. The Mercedes from our first meeting, now riddled with bullet holes. They're tracing my movements from there. My blood chilled. Will they connect it to the restaurant? Eventually. They're thorough. He struggled to sit up straighter, ignoring my protests. We need to move. It's not safe here anymore. You can barely stand. I can stand enough. To prove it, he swung his legs off the couch and pushed himself upright. The effort left him pale and swaying, but vertical. I rushed to steady him, ending up pressed against his side. Even wounded, he radiated strength, his good arm solid around my shoulders. Where would we go? I asked, trying to ignore how perfectly I fit against him. I have a place, off the books, not connected to family business. He was already moving toward his ruined shirt. We just need to get there without being seen. I helped him dress, trying to be clinical about it. But my fingers trembled as I buttoned his shirt, hyper-aware of the warm skin beneath. He'd lost his suit jacket somewhere, but even in just the blood-stained shirt and slacks, he looked like he belonged in a different world than mine. We made it to my Honda without incident, though Cassian's face was tight with pain by the time I got him into the passenger seat. I'd grabbed what I could from Jenna's, the medical supplies, a few changes of clothes, the envelope of cash that felt like it might burn through my backpack. Head north, he instructed as I pulled out of the garage. Toward the hills. I followed his directions through increasingly unfamiliar neighborhoods. The buildings grew newer, the space between them wider. By the time we turned onto a tree-lined private road, we'd left the city's chaos behind entirely. There, he pointed to a modern house set back from the road, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows. The code is 0519. I punched it into the gate's keypad, trying not to wonder about the significance of the numbers. The house beyond was stunning, not ostentatious like I'd expected, but elegant in its simplicity. It looked more like an architect's pet project than a mob safe house. "What is this place?" I asked as I helped him inside. "Somewhere I go to think." He led me through an open-concept living space that belonged in magazines. I bought it under an alias years ago. Even my closest men don't know about it. "But you're telling me..." He paused, turning to look at me with an unreadable expression. "Yes, I am." The trust implicit in that admission made my chest tight. I helped him to a leather couch that probably cost more than my car, then stood awkwardly in the middle of all that luxury. "Make yourself comfortable," he said, reading my discomfort. "Kitchen's through there, bedroom's upstairs, whatever you need." I explored while he rested, marveling at the contrast between this place and anywhere I'd ever lived. The kitchen alone was bigger than my entire apartment, all professional-grade appliances and marble countertops. The fridge was fully stocked, the pantry like a high-end grocery store. "You live here alone?" I called out. "When I need to disappear." His voice carried from the living room, which is more often than I'd like lately. I returned with water and pain medication, finding him staring out at the woods beyond the windows. The afternoon sun painted everything golden, peaceful in a way that seemed at odds with our circumstances. "It's beautiful," I said, settling beside him. My mother would have loved it. His voice was soft, distant. She always wanted a house away from the city, somewhere quiet. She died before I could give it to her. The glimpse of vulnerability made me bold. I reached out, covering his hand with mine. "I'm sorry." He turned his palm up, interlacing our fingers. She wouldn't have approved of this life. The violence, the constant watching over shoulders. She wanted me to be a doctor. A rueful smile touched his lips. Instead, I became the reason people need doctors. You're trying to change things, I reminded him. That has to count for something. Does it? He looked at me then, really looked, as if trying to find absolution in my eyes. How many people have been hurt because of what my family built? How many more will be hurt before I can tear it all down? I didn't have an answer for that. Instead, I squeezed his hand, offering what comfort I could. We sat in silence, watching shadows lengthen across the floor. Two people from different worlds finding solace in an unexpected connection. As evening approached, I made dinner from the well-stocked kitchen. Nothing fancy, just pasta with marinara and a simple salad. But Cassian ate like it was a gourmet meal, praising every bite until I was blushing. You don't have to flatter me, I said, clearing the dishes. I know I'm not exactly a chef. You're not exactly a lot of things, he said, catching my wrist as I passed. That's what makes you extraordinary. The air between us crackled with tension. I should have pulled away, maintained the careful distance between patient and caretaker. Instead, I found myself leaning closer, drawn by something stronger than common sense. Cassian, I breathed, a warning or plea. I wasn't sure which. He tugged gently, bringing me down beside him. His good hand came up to cup my face, thumb tracing my cheekbone with reverent care. Tell me to stop, he murmured, giving me an out even as his eyes burned with want. I can't, I admitted, the truth raw in my throat. His lips found mine, gentle at first, testing. Then I made a soft sound of need, and his control shattered. The kiss turned hungry, desperate, years of careful control crumbling in an instant. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, reality crashed back. I was nobody, a fired waitress with a community college dropout's future. He was power and danger wrapped in an expensive package, as far above me as the stars. This is a bad idea, I said, even as every cell in my body screamed for more. The worst, he agreed, but his hand stayed tangled in my hair, holding me close. You should run from me, Marlo. Find a nice, safe man with a nice, safe job. I've never been smart about men. I traced the line of his jaw, feeling stubble catch against my fingertips. Safe sounds boring anyway. He caught my hand, pressing a kiss to my palm that sent heat straight to my core. You have no idea what you're risking. Then tell me. I met his gaze steadily. No more half-truths or vague warnings. If I'm going to do this, whatever this is, I need to know what I'm walking into. He was quiet for a long moment, clearly wrestling with how much to reveal. Finally, he nodded. The Castellano family controls most of the shipping that comes through this city's ports. We have interests in construction, waste management, and a dozen other legitimate businesses. But underneath, he paused, choosing his words carefully. Protection rackets, though I've been phasing those out. Gambling operations I'm trying to legalize. And enforcement, making sure everyone plays by the rules. Whose rules? Mine now. My father's before me. His expression hardened. The Russians want to change that. They've been moving product through our territory, trying to establish their own power base. This morning was their declaration of war. Product. You mean drugs? Among other things. Weapons, people sometimes. His jaw clenched. Everything I've been trying to keep out of our operations. The old ways are bloody enough without that poison. I processed this, the full weight of what he was telling me settling like lead in my stomach. And if they win this war? They won't. The certainty in his voice was absolute. But they'll try to hurt me through whatever means they can, including anyone close to me. I'm not close to you, I pointed out. I'm just some waitress who gave you first aid. No. He turned my face back to his when I tried to look away. You stopped being just anything the moment you risked yourself for me. And after that kiss. His thumb brushed my lower lip, making me shiver. We both know this is heading somewhere neither of us can control. He was right. The pull between us was like gravity, inevitable, inescapable. Every rational part of my brain screamed warnings, but my heart had already made its choice in that alley, maybe even before. So, what happens now? I asked. Now I heal. I deal with the Russian problem. And then, he smiled, the expression transforming his face from dangerous to devastating. Then I court you properly. Dinner at restaurants where you don't have to serve. Flowers that aren't stolen from hotel lobbies. All the normal things people do when they're falling for each other. Falling. Present tense. My heart stuttered in my chest. And if I don't want normal? His eyes darkened. Then I'll give you extraordinary. Whatever you want, Marlowe. The world on a silver platter if you'll take it. I don't need the world, I said softly. Maybe just a little piece of it that's ours. He pulled me against him carefully, mindful of his shoulder. I curled into his good side, feeling safer than I had in years, despite the danger circling us like sharks. Stay with me tonight, he murmured into my hair. Not for anything more than this. Just stay. I nodded against his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow as exhaustion pulled him under. Outside, darkness fell over the hidden house. But inside, wrapped in his arms, I felt like I'd finally found the light I'd been searching for without knowing it. Tomorrow would bring new dangers, new choices to make. But tonight, in this stolen moment between storms, I let myself believe in the possibility of us. A mob boss and a waitress, danger and safety, falling into something that might destroy us both, or save us completely. As sleep finally took me, I thought I heard him whisper something in Italian against my hair. I didn't understand the words, but the tone was unmistakable. A promise, a prayer, a claim laid gentle as a kiss. Whatever happened next, I was his now, and terrifyingly, beautifully, he was mine. I woke to the sound of shattering glass. The living room was dark, only moonlight outlining furniture I'd barely gotten familiar with. Cassian's arm tightened around me before I fully processed what had woken us. Stay down, he breathed against my ear, already moving despite his injury. A red dot appeared on the wall above our heads, laser sight. We rolled off the couch, just as the first shot punched through the window. Glass rained down like deadly confetti. The kitchen, Cassian hissed, half dragging me across the floor. Back door. More shots followed us, methodical and precise. This wasn't random violence. Someone knew exactly where we were, exactly where to aim. My bare feet found glass, pain sharp and immediate. But adrenaline kept me moving. We made it to the kitchen just as the front door exploded inward. Heavy boots on hardwood, multiple sets, spreading through the house like infection. Cassian pressed something cold into my hand. A key fob. The garage. Black BMW. If we get separated? We won't. I gripped his good arm, refusing to consider the alternative. He kissed me hard and fast, tasting of desperation. Then we were moving again, out the back door into the cool night air. The woods that had seemed so peaceful earlier now loomed like a maze. Every shadow could hide a shooter. Every sound might herald death. We ran, or tried to. Cassian's breathing was labored, his wound bleeding fresh through his shirt. Shouts behind us, Russian voices carrying through the trees. The garage was separate from the house, maybe 50 yards through open ground. We'd be exposed, vulnerable. But staying in the woods meant getting hunted like animals. On 3, Cassian said, his professional calm at odds with the chaos around us. Stay low, zigzag if you can. Your shoulder? We'll be fine. 3, 2. A figure stepped out from behind a tree 10 feet away. The moonlight caught his scarred face, the same one I'd seen in the restaurant. He smiled, raising his gun. I moved without thinking. The self-defense class I'd taken after a handsy customer got too aggressive, muscle memory kicking in. I swept his legs while Cassian lunged for the gun. We went down in a tangle of limbs, the weapon spinning away into the underbrush. The Russian was strong, trained, but he hadn't expected the waitress to fight back. I clawed at his face while Cassian wrestled with his other arm. The man's elbow caught my ribs, driving the air from my lungs. Stars exploded across my vision. Then Cassian had the advantage, his good arm locked around the man's throat. I watched the fight drain from our attacker's body, going limp in a way that would haunt me later. "Move," Cassian commanded, pulling me to my feet. We ran for the garage, no longer caring about stealth. The BMW chirped as I hit the unlock button. I dove for the driver's seat while Cassian slammed into the passenger side. The engine roared to life, German engineering at its finest. I'd never driven anything with this much power. The garage door was still rising when I floored it, tires screaming against concrete. We burst out to find 2 SUVs blocking the driveway, more men with guns, already raising them to fire. "Hold on," I said, then did something that would have seemed insane 24 hours ago. I aimed for the gap between the vehicles and punched it. The BMW responded like a living thing, surging forward with brutal acceleration. We hit the gap at 60, side mirrors exploding as we scraped through. The car fishtailed wildly as we hit the main road, but somehow I kept control. "Left," Cassian barked. "Get to the highway." I took the turn so hard the tires screamed in protest. In the rear view, headlights were already pursuing. The Russians weren't giving up. "How did they find us?" I demanded, weaving through late-night traffic. "I don't know." His voice was tight with pain and anger. "Only 3 people knew about that house, and they're all dead." The highway on-ramp appeared ahead. I took it at dangerous speed, merging into traffic like a maniac. The BMW's engine sang as I pushed it harder, watching the speedometer climb past 90. "There's a phone in the center console," Cassian said. "Speed dial 1. I fumbled for it one-handed, nearly dropping it as I swerved around a semi. The call connected after 2 rings. "Sir?" A woman's voice, professionally alert despite the late hour. "Angela, it's me. Code 7. I need a cleaning crew at the mountain house and safe passage to the compound." "Understood. Your location? Southbound on 87, approaching exit 19. We have company." "I see them on traffic cams. 3 vehicles in pursuit. I'm dispatching intercept teams now." More headlights appeared behind us, but these came from the opposite direction, heading straight for our pursuers. The highway erupted in chaos as Cassian's people engaged the Russians. I caught glimpses in the mirror, vehicles ramming each other, muzzle flashes lighting up the night. "Take exit 23, Angela's calm voice instructed. "Left at the bottom, then follow the service road for 2 miles. Our people will be waiting." I followed her directions, hands white-knuckled on the wheel. The service road was dark, narrow, winding through industrial buildings that looked abandoned. Then gates appeared ahead, opening smoothly as we approached. The compound beyond was like something from a movie. High walls topped with wire, buildings that screamed tactical efficiency, men with assault rifles who tracked our car with professional interest. "Park by the main building," Cassian instructed, his voice weaker now. I'd barely stopped before people swarmed the car. A medical team extracted Cassian with practiced efficiency while someone else, a woman in tactical gear, helped me out on shaking legs. "You're bleeding," she observed, looking at my feet. I glanced down, surprised to see blood seeping through cuts I'd forgotten about. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving me aware of every hurt. Ribs that might be cracked, glass embedded in my soles, various bruises from our fight in the woods. "Just scratches," I said. Let's let the medics decide that. She guided me firmly toward the building. I'm Val, by the way, head of Mr. Castellano's security. You must be Marlowe. How did you— He called your name during the fight. The surveillance audio picked it up. She gave me an assessing look. Not many civilians could have handled tonight like you did. Military background? Waitress background, I corrected. You learned to handle difficult customers. She laughed, the sound unexpected in all this militaristic efficiency. I'll have to remember that line. The medical bay was like a high-end emergency room. They put me on a gurney next to where a team worked on Cassian. His wound had reopened badly, blood soaking through makeshift bandages. But he was conscious, arguing with the doctor in Italian. I'm fine, I called over. Focus on not dying. He turned his head toward me, and despite everything, the blood, the pain, the people trying to kill us, he smiled. Worried about me, Bella? Someone has to be. You clearly have no self-preservation instincts. The medical staff descended on me then, cleaning cuts, checking ribs, asking questions I answered on autopilot. Through it all, I kept my eyes on Cassian, watching the controlled chaos of trauma medicine at work. They'd cut his shirt away, revealing the full extent of the damage. The bullet wound was angry and inflamed, but that wasn't what made my breath catch. His torso was a map of violence, old scars crisscrossing newer ones, a history written in damaged flesh. See something you don't like? He asked, catching my stare. Just wondering how you're still alive. Stubbornness, mostly. He winced as they inserted an IV, and recently, a guardian angel in a waitress uniform. Heat crept up my neck despite everything. Only Cassian could make me blush while covered in blood and surrounded by armed guards. An older man in an expensive suit entered the medical bay, his presence immediately commanding attention. Everyone straightened, even the medical staff. Uncle, Cassian acknowledged. I wasn't expecting you. When my nephew gets shot and his safe house gets compromised, I take notice. The man's gaze shifted to me, sharp and assessing. This is the woman? Marlowe Reynolds, Cassian said. Marlowe, my uncle Salvatore. He runs the family's interests on the East Coast. Salvatore studied me like I was a particularly interesting specimen. The waitress who saved your life. Twice now, from what I hear. Just once, I corrected. Tonight was more of a joint effort. His lips twitched. Not quite a smile. Modest. That's refreshing. He turned back to Cassian. The Russians have overplayed their hand. The other families are nervous about this escalation. The commission wants a meeting. When? Tomorrow night. Can you stand? I can stand. Salvatore nodded, then surprised me by approaching my gurney. Miss Reynolds, my nephew seems quite taken with you. I'm just— Please don't say, just a waitress. His voice was gentle but firm. In my experience, there's no such thing as just anything. People are what they choose to be in moments of crisis. You chose to stand with him. That makes you significant. He patted my shoulder, a grandfatherly gesture at odds with his aura of power, then left as abruptly as he'd arrived. He likes you, Cassian observed. How can you tell? You're still breathing. He said it like a joke, but something in his eyes suggested he wasn't entirely kidding. The medical staff finished their work, leaving us bandaged and medicated but functional. Someone brought me clothes, jeans and a sweater that fit perfectly, making me wonder exactly how much they knew about me. You should rest, I told Cassian as they prepared to move him to a recovery room. So should you. He caught my hand as I passed his gurney. Stay close. The vulnerability in his voice undid me. This man who commanded a criminal empire, who'd faced down bullets without flinching, was afraid I might leave. Where else would I go? I asked softly, anywhere safer than here. There is nowhere safer, I realized, the truth of it settling into my bones. Not anymore. I'm Mark now, aren't I? They know my face, know I helped you. His jaw tightened. I'm sorry. I never meant... I know. I squeezed his fingers. But this is where we are. So we deal with it together. Or not at all. They gave us adjoining rooms in what seemed to be a residential wing of the compound. My space was simple but comfortable. Bed, bathroom, a window overlooking the training grounds where men ran drills despite the late hour. I showered carefully, mindful of bandaged feet and bruised ribs. The hot water stung cuts I hadn't noticed, but it also washed away blood and fear and the lingering sensation of violence. When I emerged, wrapped in a robe that had appeared as if by magic, Val was waiting. Can't sleep? I asked. Rarely. She held up a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. Thought you might need this. First combat shakes people up. I accepted the drink gratefully, the burn a welcome distraction. Is that what that was? Combat? Close enough. You handled yourself well out there. Better than some trained soldiers I've known. We sat in comfortable silence, sipping whiskey and watching the men train below. There was something hypnotic about their precise movements. Violence transformed into art. Can I ask you something? I said eventually. How do you do it? Live in this world, knowing what could happen at any moment? Val considered the question. Same way you waited tables, I imagine. One day at a time, one crisis at a time. The only difference is the stakes. The stakes are life and death. So are yours, just slower. She refilled our glasses. How many doubles did you pull to make rent? How many meals did you skip to pay bills? That's a different kind of violence, but violence all the same. I'd never thought of it that way, but she had a point. The grinding poverty I'd known was its own war, fought in increments of exhaustion and desperation. Besides, Val continued, look at what you've gained. Protection. Purpose. A man who'd burn the city down to keep you safe. Is that what he'd do? She gave me a look that suggested I was being deliberately obtuse. He let you into his private safe house. He's having you guarded by his best people. He kissed you in the middle of a firefight. What do you think? Heat bloomed in my chest, part pleasure and part terror. It's been 2 days. People don't fall that fast. People in our world do. Her expression grew serious. When death is always close, you learn not to waste time. If something matters, you grab it with both hands and don't let go. A knock interrupted whatever response I might have made. One of the guards entered, murmuring something to Val that made her expression tighten. What is it? I asked. Surveillance footage from your apartment. The Russians paid a visit. My blood chilled. My neighbors are fine. The building was empty. Gas leak evacuation. Very convenient. Her tone suggested it wasn't coincidence at all. But your apartment. She showed me footage on a tablet. My tiny home, humble as it was, had been destroyed. Furniture smashed, belongings scattered, walls spray-painted with words that made me glad I didn't speak Russian. Everything I owned, I said numbly. Things can be replaced. Val's voice was gentle. You can't be. But it wasn't about the things, few as they were. It was about the violation, the message. They'd found where I lived, torn apart my small sanctuary. The life I'd built through stubborn determination and endless work. Gone. Marlowe? Cassian's voice from the doorway. He stood there in sleep pants and nothing else, bandages stark white against his skin. I heard what happened. Val made a tactical retreat, leaving us alone. Cassian crossed to where I sat, lowering himself carefully beside me. I'm sorry, he said. About your apartment, about all of this. You saved my life and lost everything because of it. Not everything. The words slipped out before I could stop them. He went very still. No? I turned to face him, this dangerous man who'd upended my world in 48 hours. I'm starting to think I didn't have much to begin with. Just existence, survival without purpose. And now? Now I have something worth fighting for. I touched his face, feeling stubble rough against my palm. Someone worth fighting beside. He caught my hand, pressing it against his cheek. You barely know me. I know enough. I thought of how he'd shielded me during the attack, how he'd kissed me like I was precious even as bullets flew. I know you're trying to be better than what you inherited. I know you see me as more than just a waitress. I know you make me feel alive instead of just surviving. Marlowe. My name was a prayer on his lips. You have no idea what you do to me. Show me. His eyes darkened. You're hurt. We both are. So be gentle. I leaned closer, feeling his breath catch. But show me. He kissed me like I was made of spun glass, all careful pressure and restrained want. But I didn't want careful. I'd had a lifetime of careful, of playing it safe and getting nowhere. I deepened the kiss, pouring all my need and fear and newfound courage into the connection between us. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes held a possessiveness that should have frightened me. Instead, it made me feel claimed in the best way. Not owned, but cherished. Protected. Chosen. Stay with me tonight, he said. Just to sleep. I need to know you're safe. I nodded, letting him lead me to his room. We curled together on the bed, mindful of injuries but needing the contact. His arm around me felt like armor against the world. What happens tomorrow? I asked in the darkness. I meet with the commission. End this war before it destroys everything. And then? He pressed a kiss to my hair. Then I make good on my promise. Dinner where you don't have to serve. A courtship you deserve. I don't need... I know what you need, he interrupted gently. You need someone who sees your strength and honors it, who gives you a world where that strength can flourish instead of just survive. Let me be that someone, Marlowe. Let me give you that world. The offer hung between us, terrifying and tempting in equal measure. But as sleep pulled me under, safe in his arms despite the danger circling us, I knew my answer. I'd already chosen him in that alley, when I could have walked away but didn't. Everything else was just details to be worked out, assuming we survived long enough to work them out. Okay, I whispered into the darkness, but I have conditions. I felt him smile against my hair. Name them. I want to learn to defend myself properly. No more being just the damsel. Done. I want to understand your world. All of it, not just the parts you think I can handle. That's dangerous knowledge. I'm already in danger. At least let me be informed about it. He was quiet long enough that I thought he might refuse. Then, okay, what else? I want to do something meaningful, not just be your kept woman. I need purpose. I would never want to keep you, Marlowe. Only protect you while you find your own way. He paused, though I have some ideas about that when you're ready. Yeah? The family has legitimate businesses that need managing, restaurants specifically. Who better to run them than someone who knows the industry from the ground up? The possibility made my heart race, running restaurants instead of serving in them, having power instead of taking orders, building something instead of just surviving. I'd like that, I admitted. Then it's yours. Simple as that, as if reorganizing his business empire around my dreams was nothing. Cassian? Thank you for stopping that night in the rain. His arm tightened around me. Thank you for being worth stopping for." We fell asleep like that, wounded and hunted, but not alone. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, meetings with dangerous men, decisions about an uncertain future. But tonight, in this fortified compound with guards at every entrance, we carved out a moment of peace. The waitress and the mob boss, unlikely allies, turned something more. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. And somehow, that made all the difference. The commission met in an abandoned warehouse that had been transformed into neutral territory. 5 families, 5 territories, 5 men who held the city's underworld in their manicured hands. I watched from the BMW as Cassian prepared to walk into their den, adjusting his tie with movements still stiff from his healing shoulder. "You shouldn't be here," he said for the 10th time. "And you shouldn't be walking into a potential ambush 3 days after being shot," I countered. Yet here we are. Val sat in the driver's seat, her eyes constantly scanning our surroundings. Behind us, another car held 4 more of Cassian's men. Security was tight, but tension crackled in the air like electricity before a storm. "The commission guaranteed safe passage," Cassian reminded me. "The same commission that let the Russians run wild in the first place?" He turned to me, storm-gray eyes serious. "This is how our world works, Marlowe. Rules, traditions, agreements. Without them, it's just chaos and blood." "Seems like you've got plenty of both anyway." His lips quirked. Not quite a smile. "Less than there used to be. My father's generation solved everything with bullets. At least we try words first now. And if words fail, then we'll handle it." He cupped my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone. "But not tonight. Tonight is about peace." I wanted to believe him, but the weight of the Glock Val had insisted I carry said otherwise. My crash course in firearms over the past 2 days had been intense. Turns out years of steady hands from carrying trays translated well to target shooting. "Sir," Val interrupted, "it's time." Cassian kissed me, quick but thorough, then stepped out of the car. I watched him walk toward the warehouse, Salvatore joining him from another vehicle. Uncle and nephew, power and experience combined. "He'll be fine," Val said, though she didn't relax her vigilance. "The commission has rules. Even the Russians won't break them here." "Tell me about them," I said, needing distraction. "The other families." Val shifted to face me while still maintaining sightlines. "The Morettis control the docks. Everything that comes in by water goes through them. The Lucianos have the unions, construction mostly. The Grecos run numbers, gambling, sports books, lottery schemes. The Vitales have the political connections, judges and cops and councilmen. And the Castellanos, transportation and logistics. Moving things that need moving, no questions asked." She paused. "Or that was the old way. Cassian's been shifting to legitimate shipping, turning down the dirtier cargo. Which is why the Russians thought they could muscle in. Exactly. They saw reform as weakness." Her expression hardened. "They're learning otherwise." We waited in tense silence. The warehouse squatted against the night sky like a beast, giving no hint of what transpired within. Every passing minute felt like an hour. Then Val's phone buzzed. She answered in clipped Italian, her expression cycling through surprise, anger, and something that might have been respect. "What?" I demanded when she hung up. "Change of plans. The Bratva's backing down. One of their leaders is inside, negotiating terms." "That's good, right?" Her expression said otherwise. "Depends on the terms, and who's doing the negotiating." Before I could ask what she meant, the warehouse doors opened. Men began filing out, but something was wrong. The formation, the pace. This wasn't a successful conclusion. Val was already starting the car. "Something's happened. Be ready to move." Cassian emerged with Salvatore, both walking with controlled urgency. Even from a distance, I could see the tension in their shoulders, the way their heads turned constantly to check for threats. They'd barely reached us when the warehouse exploded. The shockwave hit like a physical blow, rocking the BMW. Fire erupted from the building's windows, smoke billowing into the night sky. Men scattered in all directions, some running, others drawing weapons. Cassian dove into the car as Val floored it, tires screaming against asphalt. Behind us, our escort vehicle followed suit, racing away from the inferno. "What happened?" I gasped, twisted around to watch the warehouse burn. "The Russians happened." Cassian's voice was arctic. Mikhail Volkov himself was there, said he wanted peace. Then his phone rang, the signal for his men to detonate the bombs they'd planted earlier. "But you got out." "We all did. That was the point." He met my eyes, and I saw calculation there. He wanted to send a message. The old rules are dead. This is war without boundaries. Val navigated through side streets at dangerous speeds, constantly checking for pursuit. Salvatore was on his phone in the front seat, issuing rapid-fire orders in Italian. The smell of smoke clung to them both, acrid and threatening. "The other families?" I asked. "Alive but furious. The Morettis lost 2 men to the blast, perimeter guards." Cassian's jaw clenched. "Volkov just united every family in the city against him. He thinks fear will make us submit. He's wrong." We made it back to the compound without incident, but the atmosphere had changed. What had been efficient was now militaristic. Guards at every corner, weapons openly displayed, the sense of impending violence thick as fog. In the war room, because that's what it was, maps and screens and communication equipment, the family's lieutenants were already gathering. Hard men with scarred faces and cold eyes, they looked at me with varying degrees of curiosity and dismissal. "She stays," Cassian said before anyone could object. "This concerns her now." Salvatore began. "She's been marked by the Bratva. That makes her family business." His tone brooked no argument. "Besides, she's proven herself useful in a fight." I found myself a seat at the edge of the room, trying to be invisible while absorbing everything. The discussion that followed was a masterclass in organized crime politics. Alliances discussed, resources allocated, strategies debated with the cold efficiency of any corporate board meeting. If not for the subject matter, safe houses, weapon caches, body disposal, it could have been any business planning session. "The Morettis will hit the Russian drug labs on the south side," Salvatore was saying. "The Lucianos will squeeze their construction interests. The Grecos are calling in markers from every bookie who's taken Russian money." "And us?" one of the lieutenants asked. Cassian stood at the head of the table, every inch the Don despite his youth. "We hit them where it hurts most, their supply lines. Nothing moves in this city without using our routes. As of tonight, the Bratva is blacklisted from every truck, every warehouse, every loading dock we control." "They'll just use independence," someone pointed out. "Then we buy the independence, or convince them cooperation isn't in their best interest." Cassian's smile was sharp as a blade. "Volkov wants to play without rules? Let's show him why the rules existed in the first place." The meeting continued past midnight, plans within plans unfolding. I understood maybe half of it, but one thing was clear. The Russians' dramatic gesture had backfired spectacularly. Instead of cowering the families, he'd given them a common enemy. When it finally ended, Cassian found me half asleep in my chair. "Come on," he said gently. "You need rest. So do you. I need to coordinate with the other families first. Make sure our response is synchronized." He helped me to my feet, studying my face with concern. "This isn't what you signed up for." "I didn't sign up for anything," I reminded him. "I just refused to let you bleed out in a supply closet. Everything else has been improvisation." "Any regrets?" I thought about my destroyed apartment, my lost jobs, my life upended. Then I thought about how alive I'd felt these past days, how purposeful, how his presence made me feel like more than just a survivor. "No," I said honestly. "No regrets." He walked me to my room, lingering in the doorway. "After this is over, after we've dealt with Volkov, you'll take me to dinner where I don't have to serve," I finished. "I remember. More than that." He stepped closer, voice dropping. "I want to give you everything, Marlo. A life you never have to struggle through. A future where your strength is celebrated, not exhausted. A world where—" I silenced him with a kiss, pouring all my understanding into the contact. When we parted, I stayed close, our foreheads touching. "I don't need speeches," I said softly. "I just need you to survive this war you're starting." "It's not a war I started." "No, but you'll finish it." I pulled back to meet his eyes. "And when you do, we'll figure out the rest. Together." He nodded, kissing me once more before reluctantly leaving. I watched him walk away, shoulders set with purpose, and wondered what I'd gotten myself into. 3 days ago, my biggest concern was making rent. Now I was in the middle of a mob war, protected by men with guns, falling for a man who dealt in violence and dreams with equal intensity. Val appeared as I was closing my door. "Can't sleep either?" "Doubtful." She produced a bottle of wine this time, and we sat in my room drinking from coffee mugs like college roommates. If college roommates discuss tactical firearms and body armor anyway. "He's different with you," she observed after her second mug. "Softer, more human." "He was always human." "No, he was always controlled, calculating, cold when he needed to be." She studied me over her mug. "You thawed something in him, made him remember there's more to life than power and tradition." "Is that good or bad?" "Depends on if it gets him killed." And she must have seen my expression because she quickly added, "But it might also save him. A man with something to live for fights differently than one with nothing to lose." "And what does Cassian have to lose now?" "You," she said simply. "The future you represent. The possibility of being more than his father's son." We drank in silence for a moment. Outside, I could hear the compound coming alive, vehicles arriving, men preparing for war. The efficiency of it should have terrified me. Instead, I felt oddly protected, like being in the eye of a hurricane. "Teach me," I said suddenly. "What?" "Everything. Fighting, shooting, strategy. If I'm going to be part of this world, I want to be useful, not just the girlfriend who needs protecting." Val grinned, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her. "Tomorrow, 6 a.m. gym. We'll start with hand-to-hand." "Deal." She left, and I tried to sleep, but my mind kept replaying the warehouse explosion, the casual way Volkov had tried to kill representatives of every major family. What kind of man did that? And what would Cassian have to become to stop him? A soft knock interrupted my spiral. I opened the door to find Cassian, looking haggard, but determined. "Thought you had calls to make," I said, letting him in. "I did. They're done." He sat heavily on my bed, finally showing his exhaustion. "The families are united. By tomorrow night, the Bratva won't be able to buy a cup of coffee in this city without us knowing about it." That sounds ominous. It's meant to. He rubbed his face, and I saw the weight he carried, not just of leadership, but of responsibility for every life under his protection. Volkov thinks he can rule through fear alone. But fear without respect, without structure, that's just chaos. I sat beside him, taking his hand. "What aren't you telling me?" He looked at our interlocked fingers. "To win this, I might have to become something I've tried not to be. My father's son in truth, not just name." "Meaning?" "Meaning violence. Calculated, strategic, but still violence." His grip tightened. "I've worked so hard to clean up our operations, to be better. but sometimes the old ways are the only ways that work. Then use them, I said. But come back to me after. Don't let them consume you. He pulled me against him, burying his face in my hair. How are you so strong? Years of practice. I stroked his back, feeling the tension there. Plus, I have a good teacher now. Val's going to train you? Starting tomorrow. I figured if I'm going to be a mob boss's girlfriend, I should probably know how to throw a proper punch. His laugh rumbled through me. You did pretty well in the woods without training. Beginner's luck. Next time I want to be prepared. There won't be a next time. The promise in his voice was absolute. After this is over, you'll be so protected, so insulated from danger. I'll be bored out of my mind, I finished. Cassian, I don't want to be kept in a tower. I want to stand beside you, not behind you. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, my mother used to say the same thing to my father. He never listened. She spent her life watching from the sidelines, safe, but separate. It killed her slowly, that isolation. Then don't make his mistakes. I'm trying not to. But the thought of you in danger. He shuddered. It makes me want to lock you away where nothing can touch you. Nothing can touch me here, I pointed out. But I'm not living either, just existing in a nicer cage than my apartment was. What do you want, Marlo? Really want? I thought about it. This man offering me anything within his considerable power to give. I want to be useful. I want to build something meaningful. I want to wake up with purpose instead of dread. And, I traced his jaw, I want to do it all with you. As partners, not as protector and protected. Partners. He tested the word. In everything? In what I can handle. I'm not asking to run enforcement crews or plan assassinations. I felt him flinch at the words. But the legitimate businesses you mentioned, the restaurants, let me help with those. Let me build something clean from the ground up. While a war rages around us, especially then, someone needs to remember what we're fighting for. A future where the violence isn't necessary anymore. He kissed me then, deep and desperate, like I was air and he was drowning. When we broke apart, his eyes held something I'd never seen before. Hope. Stay with me tonight, he said. I need to hold you. Need to remember what peace feels like before tomorrow brings more war. We curled together on my narrow bed, fully clothed but intimately entwined. His breathing eventually evened out, exhaustion finally claiming him. But I stayed awake, watching shadows move across the ceiling, thinking about the strange turn my life had taken. Marlo Reynolds, waitress, survivor, now what? Mob girlfriend seemed too simple a term for what was developing between us. Partner was closer, but still not quite right. What do you call someone who makes you want to be better while accepting who you are? Who sees your darkness, but chooses to be your light? Mine, Cassian murmured in his sleep, arm tightening around me. My Marlo. And maybe that was enough definition for now. His, yes, but also my own. Strong enough to stand beside him, brave enough to build something from the ashes of who we used to be. The morning would bring training with Val, teaching me to be dangerous in my own right. The days ahead would bring war, Cassian unleashing the full power of his family against the Russian threat. But after, and there would be an after, I'd make sure of it, we'd have that dinner, that future, that chance to be more than our circumstances. I pressed a kiss to his sleeping forehead, a promise and a prayer combined. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. The waitress and the mob boss, building something beautiful from bullets and broken glass. Dawn was breaking outside, painting the compound in shades of gold and shadow. A new day bringing new challenges. But for the first time in my life, I was eager to meet them. I had something worth fighting for now, someone worth becoming dangerous for. "My Cassian," I whispered back, and finally let sleep take me. The war for the city was about to begin. But the war for our future? That was already won the moment he stopped for a girl standing in the rain. 6 weeks. That's how long the war with the Bratva lasted. 6 weeks of carefully orchestrated violence, of territory seized and blood spilled, of Cassian becoming the cold strategist he'd tried so hard not to be. I watched him transform day by day, the gentleness I knew still there but buried under necessity. Val had kept her promise, training me every morning until my body became a weapon I'd never imagined it could be. Bruises became badges, exhaustion a constant companion. But when the Russians tried to grab me from a grocery store in broad daylight, I was ready. 2 men with Slavic accents and grabbing hands. The old Marlowe would have screamed, frozen, been taken. The new one broke the first man's nose with an elbow strike and put the second on the ground with a knee to the groin. By the time Cassian's security arrived, I was holding one at gunpoint with his own weapon while shoppers fled in panic. "You're learning," was all Cassian said when he heard. But his eyes held pride and something darker. Satisfaction that I could defend myself. Fear that I'd needed to. The war turned in week 4 when Volkov made his fatal mistake. He went after the family's children. A daycare center in Little Italy, owned by a Moretti cousin. No one was hurt. The bomb was found in time. But the message was clear. Nothing was off limits. "He just signed his death warrant," Salvatore said in the emergency meeting that followed. "There are rules even we don't break." I watched from my usual corner as the 5 families planned Volkov's destruction with surgical precision. Gone was any pretense of negotiation or peaceful resolution. The Russian had crossed a line from which there was no return. "I want to help," I said when the meeting ended. Cassian turned to me, expression carefully blank. "No. I'm not asking to pull triggers, but there must be something. Marlowe." His voice was steel. "Not this. Never this." But Val found me later with a different perspective. "There is something you could do. Something clean but crucial." She explained that the families needed a neutral location for coordinating the final assault on Volkov's compound. Somewhere unconnected to any of their operations, managed by someone Volkov wouldn't recognize as a threat. "The restaurant Cassian promised you?" Val smiled grimly. "We just acquired one. Need someone to run it while serving as an information hub. Interested?" I was. Piccati, Italian for sins, sat in a neutral neighborhood, closed for renovations that were real, but also provided cover. I threw myself into the work, creating something beautiful while dangerous men planned death in the back rooms. During the day, I hired staff, planned menus, argued with contractors. At night, I served espresso to men with guns while they coordinated surveillance and strikes. 2 worlds bleeding together, the legitimate and the lethal. Cassian watched me navigate both with something like wonder. "You're thriving," he said one evening, finding me reconciling invoices, while 2 lieutenants discussed body disposal at the next table. "I have purpose," I corrected. "Makes all the difference." He kissed me then, deep and possessive, not caring who saw. When we parted, every man in the room was studiously looking elsewhere. "After tomorrow," he promised. "After it's done. Tomorrow, the final assault on Volkov's stronghold. Every family contributing men, resources, fury. A lesson written in blood that some lines couldn't be crossed. Come back to me," I said simply. "Always." But nothing ever goes according to plan. I was at Piccati the next night, ostensibly overseeing the kitchen installation, but really waiting for word. Val had stayed with me, along with 4 guards. The families were radio silent during the operation. Too much risk of interception. The first sign of trouble was a black van pulling up outside. The second was the RPG one of its occupants aimed at our window. "Down!" Val roared, tackling me behind the bar as the world exploded. The front of the restaurant disappeared in fire and flying glass. Smoke billowed thick and choking. Through the ringing in my ears, I heard boots on broken glass, Russian voices barking orders. "Volkov's failsafe," Val gasped, blood running from a gash on her forehead. If he couldn't win, he'd take what matters most to the family's leaders. What mattered most? The revelation hit like a physical blow. I wasn't just Cassian's girlfriend anymore. I was his acknowledged weakness, the pressure point enemies could exploit. "Back door," Val ordered, but shadows were already moving there. We were surrounded. This is where the story should end. Overwhelmed, outgunned, the innocent waitress finally paying the price for falling in love with a dangerous man. But I'd learned too much, become too much, to go down without a fight. "Kitchen," I said, grabbing Val's backup piece from her ankle holster. "I know every inch of this place." We moved through smoke and chaos, using the renovation debris as cover. 2 Russians came around the corner. I put them down without hesitation, Val's training overriding thought. Behind us, our guards were fighting desperately, buying time with their lives. The kitchen was a maze of half-installed equipment and exposed wiring. I'd spent enough time here to navigate it blind, which was fortunate given the smoke. Val covered our rear while I led us toward the old service tunnel that connected to the building next door. A detail the contractors had bitched about, but I'd insisted on keeping. We'd almost made it when Volkov himself stepped from behind a steel rack. He wasn't what I'd expected. Younger, handsomer, with the kind of dead eyes that spoke of a soul sold long ago. "Mrs. Castellano," he said in accented English. "Or not yet. My apologies for interrupting the courtship." "Pretty sure trying to kill me already did that," I replied, keeping the gun trained on him despite my shaking hands. He smiled. "You have spirit. I see why he keeps you. Unfortunately, that's exactly why you have to die. A man like Cassian, when he loses what he loves most." He shrugged. "He becomes reckless, vulnerable, defeatable." "You're assuming a lot." "Am I?" He tilted his head. "Your lover is currently walking into an empty building expecting to find me. Instead, he'll find your body. The rage will consume him, make him stupid. Then I'll kill him too." Val moved to flank him, but more Russians appeared, weapons raised. We were outnumbered, outmaneuvered. This time there was no clever escape. Although, Volkov continued, studying me with calculation. "Perhaps there's another way. You could live, serve a different purpose. Cassian Castellano's woman turned to our side. The psychological damage alone. I'd rather die." "Yes," he sighed. "I thought you might say that." He raised his gun, and time slowed to honey. I saw Val moving, knew she wouldn't be fast enough. Saw my own weapon lifting, too slow, too late. Saw my death in Volkov's empty eyes. The gunshot was impossibly loud in the enclosed space, but it was Volkov who staggered, looking down at the spreading red stain on his chest with almost comical surprise. Behind him stood Cassian, smoking gun steady despite the murder in his eyes. "You were right about one thing," Cassian said conversationally as Volkov dropped to his knees. "Losing her would make me reckless. That's why I'll never let it happen." Volkov tried to speak, blood bubbling from his lips. Then he pitched forward and was still. The kitchen erupted in violence as both sides processed their leader's death. But the Russians were already outnumbered. Cassian hadn't come alone. Men flooded in from every entrance, the combined forces of all 5 families turning the space into a killing floor. I found myself pressed against Cassian's chest, his arm iron around me while he continued firing over my head with mechanical precision. Each shot dropped a Russian, clearing a path toward safety. "You were supposed to wait at the compound," I said into his shirt. "You were supposed to be safe here." His voice was rough with fear-fueled anger. "We need to work on our communication." The gunfire was dying down, Russians surrendering or fleeing as they realized their cause was lost. Volkov's empire, built on fear and brutality, crumbled the moment he fell. "Is it over?" I asked. "This part." Cassian holstered his weapon, both hands now free to hold me. "The war's won. The families are safe. The Bratva is finished in this city. And us?" He pulled back to look at me, and I saw everything in his eyes. Fear at how close he'd come to losing me, pride at how I'd handled myself. Love so fierce it took my breath away. "Now I keep my promise. Dinner where you don't have to serve. A life where you never have to run again. A future where..." I kissed him to shut him up, pouring all my yes into the contact. Around us, men were dealing with bodies and blood. But in our bubble there was only this. Two people who'd found each other through violence but chosen love. When we parted, I stayed close. I want to rebuild Picati. Make it real, not just a front. Done. I want to keep training with Val. Obviously. I want a spring wedding. Small, family only. He stilled. "Marlo Reynolds, are you proposing to me?" "Someone has to. You're too busy making grand speeches about the future to actually plan for it." His laugh was rich, rolling through the destroyed kitchen like music. "Yes, to all of it. To anything you want. To everything we can build from this moment forward." Sirens were approaching. The family's connections ensuring they'd arrive exactly late enough. Time to disappear, to let official stories be crafted about gang violence and territorial disputes that had nothing to do with us. But first, in a kitchen that smelled of gunpowder and possibility, Cassian Castellano kissed his future wife like the world was ending and beginning all at once. Which, in a way, it was. 6 months later, Picati reopened to rave reviews. The food critic from the Times called it a phoenix risen from unlikely ashes, serving redemption with every course. She had no idea how literally true that was. I stood in my office, watching the dining room fill with a mix of neighborhood regulars and carefully vetted members of the 5 families. At table 12, Salvatore held court with the other family heads, their peace forged in shared victory. At the bar, Val nursed a whiskey while keeping protective watch over everything. And in the kitchen, Cassian was arguing with our head chef about the proper way to prepare osso buco. He'd officially stepped back from day-to-day operations, letting Salvatore guide the family while he focused on legitimate businesses. But old habits died hard, and he still commanded any room he entered. "You know he's wrong about the garlic," Maria said, appearing at my elbow. My former co-worker from Giovanni's now served as Picati's front-of-house manager, ruling the waitstaff with an iron fist wrapped in a warm smile. "I know, but he likes to think he's helping." "Men," she shook her head. "By the way, table 6 is asking for you. Says he's an old friend." I made my way through the dining room, stopping to greet regulars and check on new guests. Table 6 held a lone diner, someone I didn't recognize until he looked up. "Hello, Marlo." One of the Russians from the grocery store, the one whose nose I'd broken. He held his hands carefully visible on the table, showing he was unarmed. "Bold of you to come here," I said, signaling subtly for Val's attention. "I mean no harm. The war is over. I work for the Lucianos now. They absorbed what remained of our operations." He touched his still crooked nose ruefully. "I wanted to pay my respects, and my compliments to the chef. I'll pass them along. Also to say thank you. When Volkov fell, those of us with sense were able to transition to better situations. Your husband's mercy and victory allowed that." My husband. The title still sent a thrill through me, 3 months after our quiet ceremony in the compound's garden. "He's a practical man," I said carefully. "Dead enemies can't become allies." The Russian smiled. "Indeed. Enjoy your success, Mrs. Castellano." You've earned it." He left generous cash on the table and departed, Val's eyes tracking him until he was out of sight. Such was our life now. Former enemies breaking bread in our establishment, peace maintained through strength, and occasionally shared meals. Cassian emerged from the kitchen, immediately finding me in the crowd. His presence still did things to my pulse, especially when he looked at me like that. Possessive and proud and utterly in love. "Everything okay?" he asked, arms sliding around my waist. "Everything's perfect." And it was. Not fairy tale perfect. There were still guards, still protocols, still the occasional reminder of the violent world we straddled. But it was ours, built from bullets and bad decisions that led to better ones. "Dance with me," he said suddenly. "There's no music, and we're in the middle of service." "So?" He was already leading me to the small space between tables, hand settling at the small of my back. Our restaurant. Our rules. Somehow, probably Val, soft music began playing. Cassian spun me into a proper dance position, leading with the same confidence he did everything else. Other diners watched with indulgent smiles, recognizing romance when they saw it. "People are staring," I murmured. "Let them. I want the whole world to see how I look at my wife." "And how's that?" "Like you're the rain that ended my drought, the storm that cleared my sky. If you make one more weather metaphor, I'm stepping on your foot." His laugh rumbled through me. "Fair enough. Then I'll just say this. You saved me, Marlowe. In every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," I corrected. "That's what partners do." We danced until the song ended, ignoring the applause from our audience. Then duty called. Him to his meeting with Salvatore, me to a kitchen crisis involving the dessert special. But we'd be home together tonight, in the brownstone we'd bought near the park. We'd share wine and stories of our day, plan expansions for the restaurant, maybe work on that family Salvatore kept hinting about. A life. A real life, built on unlikely foundations but solid nonetheless. The girl who'd waited tables, and the man who'd waited for her, proving that sometimes the best love stories begin with a stranger's kindness in the rain, and the choice to repay it when it mattered most. As I watched Cassian work the room, shaking hands and sharing jokes, I thought about that night. How close I'd come to refusing his offer of a ride. How different everything would be if I'd chosen fear over trust. But I hadn't. I'd gotten in that car, and he'd gotten out to meet armed pursuers, and somehow we'd built forever from those desperate moments. "Hey, boss," one of the new waitresses said nervously. "Customer wants to compliment the owner." "On my way." I straightened my dress, designer now, though I still moved like a waitress when rushed, and headed back into the fray. There would always be customers to serve, even if I was serving them in a different capacity now. Always be work to do, purpose to fulfill. But at the end of each shift, there would be Cassian, my unlikely savior, my complicated love, my partner in all things legal and otherwise. The waitress who'd saved a mob boss, and the mob boss who'd saved her right back. Not a fairy tale, but something better. A love story written in choices, each one leading us closer to this moment, this life, this forever that started with a storm and would weather any that followed. Thunder rumbled outside, promising rain. I smiled, remembering another storm, another night, another version of myself who'd stood shivering and alone. Not alone anymore, never alone again. The bell above the door chimed as new customers arrived, and I moved to greet them, carrying myself with the confidence of a woman who'd found her place in the world. It wasn't the place I'd expected, but it was exactly where I belonged, beside him. Always beside him.